So we're going to start the 57th day of class looking at this blank geohistogram, and I'm going to add a few things. Put on the y-axis, put some time and the regions of the world and the Western world and the Eastern world, and I'm going to put the empire names of the major empires, the smaller empires, and put some color into it. And here's a picture of our world. Now, I don't want to talk about this part of the story. I already have in prior videos and prior classes, but I do want to talk about the fall of Rome here in 476. And we learned about the barbarian groups to the west that comprised portions of the old Roman Empire and the rise of the Byzantines to the east. We spoke of the Islamic caliphates and their interactions with Christians in the Crusades and so forth. But I want to focus on the train of Western civilization. So Western civilization beginning in Greece and into Rome and into Byzantine. Now we see a disconnect, and these were very, very dark times. It even has the nickname Dark Ages, the Middle Ages, illiteracy and sickness and so forth. But from this gap, from this disconnect, we see the Holy Roman Empire started at 800 AD, Christmas Day of 800 AD, easy day to remember. And you can follow the train of time into the Habsburg, which coincided with the European nations, which eventually became imperial, and one of its colonies, America. So if we can trace our story back, we can trace it back here if you go back far enough. So, I want to briefly talk about the Holy Roman Empire, but more specifically, I'm more concerned about Charlemagne, because I think Charlemagne's obviously a very important figure, but a very interesting figure in terms of leadership. So let's start with a quote from the philosopher Voltaire, where he quoted, "This agglomeration which called and still calls itself the Holy Roman Empire was neither holy, nor Roman, nor an empire in any way." Now that's pretty confusing because you just learned Holy Roman Empire, and Voltaire said, no, not so much. So here's the textbook simple definition. What was the Holy Roman Empire? It was a political entity that covered a large portion of Europe. It centered on Germany, and it lasted from 800 to 1806. I don't think I've alleviated anybody's confusion here. And again, I want to reiterate this point of the fall of Rome. Now, Rome was vast. Rome was enormous. Rome was the powerhouse in the world for centuries and centuries. When it fell, you had parts of the former empire become Byzantium, and others become a series of essentially barbarian groups with all the Lombards and Gauls and Picts and Jutes and Angles and Saxons and lions and bears and tigers, oh my. And it was that sort of thing. But eventually this mismatch, this kind of series of barbarian groups does eventually get unified into this by Charlemagne. Now here's the question I want to ask you. How do you unify disparate people? How do you unify people who are very, very different in culture, in language, in custom? Now, when you think of Charlemagne, you have to think of Christianity. That was the glue, that was the unifier of this empire, which went on to become known as the Holy Roman Empire. And in 800, Christmas Day, he was crowned emperor by Pope Leo III. Now, Charlemagne was king of the Franks, a Germanic tribe. Now, his father was Pepin the Short, who was the leader of the Franks. And when he passed away, him and his brother were left to run the Franks. His brother passed away. He had total control. But he transcended this into something much larger and eventually unifying it. Now, eventually, what powers did the Holy Roman Emperor have? Very little, almost a figurehead in the later parts of it. But the early parts of it, they had significant clout. But, it said 1,000 years from Charlemagne to Napoleon. That's a very, very rough time estimate. In fact, in 1648, there was the Peace of Westphalia that gave almost complete sovereignty to about 300 states of the Holy Roman Empire. So it's really a name only. So Charlemagne is the guy. Charlemagne, I like to think, brought unity to a very disparate group. And in class, we did this exercise about how a leader unifies people. And we started with our principal. And although there's challenges, don't get me wrong, it's hard to be a principal. There's 600 students and some teachers. It's more achievable, and we talked about ways we did that. Then we scaled it up to our governor, made it more challenging. Then we scaled it up to our president, even more challenging. So what the class agreed with was the scale of the leadership makes it more complex. So I'm going to argue the point, the fact that Charlemagne unified such a vast amount of people shows a tremendous amount of leadership. And here's me in the Vatican kneeling on the spot where Charlemagne was crowned on Christmas Day 800. And that was a cool moment for me. So again, I do want to focus on Charlemagne the man more than the Holy Roman Empire because I think he's significant. But every human being is flawed. Every human being has their good points and their bad points. So I want to ask you this question. Using these primary sources, was Charlemagne good leader, bad leader, and what quality of leadership? So the enemy were so routed and overthrown in these two battles that they never afterwards ventured to take the offensive or resist the attacks of the king, unless they were protected by a strong position. That shows me toughness. That shows me strength. That's a quality of leadership. I'm going to say good leader. Now, this quote said, "A great many of the Frank as well as the Saxon nobility, men occupying the highest post of honor, perished in this war, which only came to an end after a lapse of 32 years. So if you keep doing the same thing over and over and over, even though it's not successful, I don't know if that's being obstinate or stubborn, but I don't know if that is a great quality of leadership. I think flexibility and being able to strategize and change your plan based on evidence is good. I don't think he showed it here, so that might be a flaw for Charlemagne. The third source was he so largely increased the Frank kingdom, which was already great and strong when he received it at his father's hands, that he more than doubled its former territory. Obviously, if you double the skills of your athletes, you're a great coach. If you double the size of your business, you're a good business person. So doubling their stronghold, most definitely a good leader. He wanted all boys to have an education, but at the end of his reign, only monks and priests had received schooling. If you want something to get done and you're a great leader, you get it done. Also, not providing education for all your people, it rings of, even in the context of the time, is exclusionary. So I'm going to say showed a lack of maybe wherewithal, a lack of initiative. So I'm going to say, that's not his finest moment. Now, this fifth quote said, "While he was dressing and putting on his shoes, he not only gave an audience to his friends, but if the count of the palace told of any suit in which his judgment was necessary, he had the parties brought before him forthwith, took cognizance of the case, and gave his decision just as he were sitting on the judgment seat." So even if he's getting dressed and there is a problem to be solved, he solved it. So he was accessible. That's a great quality of leadership. Also, he didn't let things fester. He took care of it immediately. As Vanilla Ice said, if there was a problem, I'll solve it. Check out the hook as my DJ revolves it, Ice Ice Baby. You take care of it right there on the spot. So I'm going to say good leader. How about this one? This king who showed himself so great in extending his empire and subduing foreign nations and was constantly occupied with plans to that end, undertook also very many works calculated to adorn and benefit his kingdom, brought several of them into completion. So he made things better. It's like a public park or a really beautiful piece of art. It's just good for everybody. And he did that. Also, he finished the plan. So unlike some other areas, perhaps, he did have the full plan come to fruition. Great leader. That's fantastic. You're bettering stuff for everybody. You have follow through. He liked foreigners and was at great pains to take them under his protection. He understood that talent came from elsewhere, and he welcomed talented people from elsewhere. I would argue that's the secret to America's success, bringing immigrants in and utilizing their talents. So being open, being, utilizing the talents of your people, great leader. Good job, Charlemagne. This quote, "He cherished with great fervor and devotion the principles of the Christian religion which had been instilled into him from infancy." Now, if you use modern eyes, you might say, we live in a culturally pluralistic nation. We don't want people who are Christian to the point you're excluding or think less of others. Look at the context of the time. To unify the people in the Holy Roman Empire, he needed a unifier, and that unifier was Christianity. So if you are a Christian, you'd say, yeah, it's fantastic. He has Christian principles, and I'm all for that. But even if you're secular, you have to say, being able to unify people under a common identity is pretty effective politically. So I'm going to argue good leader, unifier. So again, I think there's more good than bad. Three more. It was after he had received the imperial name, finding the laws of his people very defective. The Franks have two sets of laws, very different in many particulars. He determined to add what was wanting, to reconcile discrepancies and correct what was vicious and wrongly cited in them. Hey, if you're a leader and there's a bad law and you fix it, fantastic. Good leader. Again, more good than bad. Two more. At the Treaty of Verdun, his empire was divided into three and weakened. Now, he's getting pretty old at that point. So that shows when he wasn't at full strength, that's where things broke down. So while he was around, things were strong. When that happened, not so much. And then he fought the Moors of Spain for 20 years, but only managed to capture a small area of land beyond the Pyrenees. Now, you might be saying he's trying to secure this Christian Holy Roman Empire, fighting the Muslims who are competing for land. He's showing he's standing up to an opponent. You might say he's being obstinate, he's being bullheaded. Maybe that's a mixed answer. So, you have to look at any leader and look at the merits of what they did. And these are all primary sources from Charlemagne, but I think we can agree that he was a great unifier, and he did start the Holy Roman Empire, which was 1,000 years of succession of Christian kings of Europe that went on all the way to the time of Napoleon. So, thank you for watching.